All right, so we are very fortunate that we have President Gregory Washington starting off with a keynote this afternoon. So hopefully President Washington will turn on his camera. I know we're about a minute early. But, you know, Mason was extremely lucky 2 years ago that Dr. Washington, thank you, Dr. Washington, that Dr. Washington came to George Mason University from the University of California at Irvine. And in fact, Dr. Washington is, was a friend of Dr. Susan Turner, who is a good colleague of ours, who's in the Criminology Law and Society program at Irvine. Dr. Washington is the 8th president for George Mason University. He has shepherded us through the last 2 years with COVID and everything that COVID has meant. He's also, during that period of time, reinvigorated our student enrollments so that George Mason University in Northern Virginia, has the highest, largest student population in the state of Virginia. There's a number of initiatives that Dr. Washington has taken on, including an anti-racism and inclusion task force and something called the Mason Virginia Promise. As an accomplished engineer, Dr. Washington brings to us a good perspective, including the fact that he is a first-generation college graduate, which is something that we at Mason pride because we have a lot of first-generation students. And so with that, I want to welcome Dr. Washington, and he's going to talk about social justice in higher education. For those of you who have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and then I will man that Q&A box and raise questions, Dr. Washington, when you're done with your remarks. So we're very pleased you're here today, and we thank you for giving your time to us. We know you probably have a really busy schedule.
Well, it is great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with all of you. So thank you, Dr. Taxman, for your introduction. And to be honest with you, thank you for your work in the development of this center. It is definitely needed in our society today, and I really, really appreciate it. And welcome to everyone to the ACE Symposium. From what I can tell of the program, you got an impressive lineup of speakers. And, for those of you wondering why a president would present at something like this, I just say, bear with me a little bit. It's going to get better from here, because that list of speakers is really, really impressive. For those of you tuned in from around the country, you might not know about George Mason and what we're all about, because that also talks a little bit about why I'm here. But George Mason is the largest and most diverse public institution in the state of Virginia. We got nearly 40,000 students. And here, diversity really matters. And when I say diversity, I'm talking about all types of diversity, from diversity of origin, from diversity of circumstance, from diversity of thought. All of this allows us to think creatively and to find solutions to the kinds of challenges that you'll be discussing and that I'm going to be discussing with you today as we kick this off. ACE joins forces from 4 of our colleges here at Mason. It is a leader in examining correctional issues that truly make a difference in the lives of many by helping to bring about change in the legal system. And you'll see why that is so incredibly important to me. ACE has relationships with more than 200 agencies, including the Virginia Department of Corrections, where we work on implementing science into practice, and where ACE is instrumental in developing tools for the field to apply scientific principles to the practice. ACE is also the home to the coordination and Translation Center for the National Institute on Drug Abuse's Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network, or JCOIN. Is that right? I'm just gonna say JCOIN because the other part is too much. All right, but it's a $25 million initiative that brings students, professionals, stakeholders together to look at the dissemination, the active dissemination and utilization of scientific knowledge. So you have the great tools in place to work from. So the question then becomes, why is this important to me and why am I here? The reality is there are 21 grand challenges in the world today. These go from, and I classify them in two areas. One, the classification are those entities that can cause extinction level events. This is stuff like climate change and infectious disease. You see what we're dealing with COVID and the like. And then the other category of grand challenges are things that are disruptive towards in life. And definitely the issues in our criminal justice system are reflective of that. Let me put it in perspective. In 1970, we incarcerated about 200,000 individuals. That was the full extent. In 2022, the number is now 2.3 million, right? In our region, 1 in 7 people in DC have a criminal record. 1 in 7, okay? And that growth started in the 1970s with the war on drugs, right? What we have done now, if you look at our penal code, if you look at what has happened to it, we've added more than 1,000 laws in just the last 40 years, right? And what has happened is that our moral code has become our criminal code. You've seen a merging of these two, right? And so that's why a person like an Eric Garner can lose his life for selling cigarettes, cassette tapes and the like, in front of a convenience store. So, our moral code and our criminal code have merged, right? It's why you have encounters with the police for people with vagrancy, for vagrancy and the like, that wind up leading to death. So we criminalize homelessness, poverty, selling contraband. All of these things cause problems, right? And so it's a grand challenge for us. It's definitely a grand challenge for me. I have 2 boys. One of them is 6'4", about 215 pounds. He is he's an athlete. Both of my kids go to Ohio State, but he has a 3.9 average in engineering. Okay, and I'm concerned with how he is viewed when he enters an area, when he goes out in his car late at night, how he is engaged. I got another son who's 6'2". He's the older one. And the 6'2" kid, I worry about the same thing. Both of these kids are engineers, they're honor students, they've done exceptional, they've done everything we asked them to do. But the reality of the situation is in this country, they can be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it can cost them dearly. And the reality is this: Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely as white Americans to be killed by police. That's a fact. The fact is that there are more than 2 million people in prisons in America. Most are locked up for nonviolent cases. 75% of those who end up in prison are for drug offenses. And most of those are Black and Latino. And that happened because, when we started this war on drugs, we did so in a disproportionate manner. We made 1 gram of cocaine, the sentences for 1 gram of cocaine, for 1 gram of cocaine equivalent to the sentences for 100 grams of powdered cocaine, right? We did all of these kinds of things, and that led to mass incarceration of Black and brown people. I'm not talking about the fact that people committing the crimes. Again, I'm not talking about the fact that people committing crimes. I'm talking about basic changes in code and policy that led to large numbers of individuals being criminalized, right? When they were not indeed being any more criminals than anybody else, okay? And so these are the kinds of things that I believe centers like ACE and all of you all on this call will engage and will help us solve. And this is why I'm so excited to have it here. You know, one of the things about Mason that I really like is that our faculty are involved in the grand challenges of our time. And that is actually a feature of having a younger faculty at a younger institution, right? Because people get involved with what is state of the art and what are the key issues, and they wind up getting involved in those key issues, but they stay in them a lot longer than they need to, right? And so you see folk who wind up, who've been in the same area for 30, 40, 50 years. The big challenges in the area have long since gone, but they are still there and doing good work, but still there in those areas. And that's one of the challenges that many of our peer institutions have. We don't have those challenges per se. Our faculty are involved in the most significant issues of our time. Now, I was given some questions to answer, and in the context of what my talk is, and so let me answer a few of them, and then let me open it up to questions from all of you. One of the questions was, what social justice goals should a university pursue? Okay, and my philosophy is very clear, that social justice builds a framework at Mason for addressing societal and systematic bias. And what we want to do is help our faculty and staff and students understand the basis of social justice, right? We promote the 5 pillars of social justice in terms of how we operate as a campus. And we hope to teach that directly to individuals, and that is access to resources, equity, participation, diversity, and human rights. Our anti-racism and inclusive excellence initiative really seeks to hone in on those 5 pillars and to utilize them as a basis for how we actually promote and move the campus forward. If you look closely at the RE recommendations and the principles by which RE was established, you'll see those principles in spades. Another question: what do you hope research centers at a university will accomplish in this space? And what do you hope students will learn during their time at the university? Look, the reality is this one: we have got to create the next generation of leaders on this issue. And what do I mean when I say leaders? I'm talking about people who have an understanding of the facts and can take those facts and apply them to policy in ways that enable us to rewrite policy to make outcomes more equitable. Again, that comes from having the knowledge first and then putting methodology in place to help utilize that knowledge and information to enact policy and law and changes to the law. Isn't that what the ACE Center kind of does? And so I'm really excited about our ability to address that. Another question here reads, how can communities best engage with their universities to facilitate social justice? Well, at Mason, it's really easy. It's easy to get involved with our anti-racism and inclusive excellence initiatives. You literally just reach out to Sharnia Artis or any of the individuals involved. We had more than 150 faculty, staff, and students involved in that process. It literally was a bottoms up process, not necessarily a top down one. And this is really, really critical that universities start to engage with students and everyone to deal with social justice issues. Let me highlight one reason as to why it's so critical. Our very value proposition is now being questioned, right? You actively hear students, politicians, parents, all ask the question, why should I spend an enormous amount of money to get an advanced degree when a job, when a career is not promised on the back end? Why should I do that? Why can't I take a 12-week course from Google and go out and make $90,000, $80,000 a year working as a data scientist? Or why can't I do the same thing with Microsoft or with Amazon? Why would I need to go through and get an advanced degree in many of these other areas? And look, what I contend to you is because we have real grand challenge problems. They're real. They will impact us where we sit. They will cause a dramatic impact on our standard of life and our ability to live later on. And the solutions are complicated. The solutions are difficult. You actually need significant study time to get the actual knowledge base that's necessary to go out and solve these problems. You can't do it in a 12-week class. You can't do it in a 14-week engagement. You need engagement with people, like Faith Taxman, like Danielle Roots, who have dedicated their lives towards solving these issues. That is something that can't be accomplished in short form. It can't. There is no quick fix, right? And so. And it's great when we have an institution that has the kind of people that see the challenges and that have put in place an infrastructure to help people engage in order to solve it. And the last one I'll read off here is this one. How is George Mason making any headways on helping individuals in jail, prison, or on probation take advantage of educational opportunities? Many universities have fostered this whole inside-outside program where college students can attend classes with those who are involved, in the actual, who are part of the penal system. This is one that we would like to put in place. We have started very early in the early stages of this by putting in place mechanisms that allow our students to apply and to not have their past criminal history, they have a criminal record or the like, affect their acceptance into academic programs on our campus. Believe it or not, more than half of the four-year institutions don't have this. You put down that you have a criminal record, you will not get accepted. That is not the case at Mason. So we do value having these partnerships, but this is an area where we need to improve and get better. Look, we're committed to reducing the social inequities that affect how individuals get involved in the legal system. And we are committed to do that by providing educational opportunities. That's really where we want to position ourselves. And I believe it's the best thing for us to do long-term. And so on that note, I'm gonna stop here and open it up for questions.
Well, President Washington, thank you very much for your insights, also your commitment to, solving some of the world's grand challenges, as you note, and also, for your participation today. So we have one question. There was a series of questions, but we have one question in our chat box that basically wants to know, what might the university help research centers like ACE, because we all have to bring in our own funds for our research projects and everything. What could the university do to assist us, and that can also foster some of the social justice work that we think is so critical to address some of the grand challenges in our criminal legal system?
Well, I think there are two areas that I see. First, we need constructive partnership. And what does that constructive partnership look like? Well, we want to put in place mechanisms that allow us to access the criminal justice system in order to help individuals who are currently incarcerated actually take courses at Mason, continue to develop themselves. The reality is when you're doing time, you can do the time, or you can use the time to your own advantage, right? And we're the kind of institution that accepts people where they are. And so this can be a nice venue for us being able to help reduce the rate of recidivism in individuals by providing them a pathway that has an opportunity on the back end. And that's going to happen in partnership. I don't know. We don't know what we don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but you all do. You're actively involved in this space. And so having you work with us is important. The other piece is that we are now actively engaged with our state and our federal elected officials, a number of which this issue is important. These issues are important to them. And there are opportunities for earmarks. There are opportunities for support, real cash support that we can team with you to get in order to help the center financially. It's probably not going to be on the order of a $25 million type deal that you have already, but every amount helps.
Yeah, well, the J-Coin is an anomaly. We were very pleased to get an NIH center grant and to bring it into Mason per se. So I wanted to, so Danielle, can you unmute Danielle? She has a question.
Okay. Hi, very nice to see you. I spend a lot of time thinking about graduate students because we work with so many at ACE, but I also work with a lot of undergrads. And I'm so grateful for Oscar, the Undergraduate Research Scholars Office at Mason. I was wondering if you'd given any thought to the ways that beyond Oscar, are there other ways that research centers could reach and sort of involve undergraduates in the work that we're doing that would really help them hone and develop their skills and their knowledge during the time that we have them as undergrads, because many of them don't go on to graduate school. And I feel like in many ways they're an untapped resource for us, but we could offer so much more to them. And I'm sure that you have thought about this, and I have not thought about it enough.
Well, look, the reality is we have to figure out more ways to incentivize faculty. And so my story is one. I went to a dean's office to complain that we didn't have enough U.S. Teaching assistants teaching us in our labs. I just couldn't understand them. And I left that dean's office with a job working with a faculty member as an undergraduate researcher. It literally was a group of us students, and as we were walking out of the room, he grabbed me on the shoulder, pulled me back in the room, and said, "You need to go to grad school. I'm going to start having you work with the faculty to see what it's all about." And that really started me on my trek towards graduate education. And it was working with those faculty members that really opened my eyes to the kind of problems I can solve and what you can do. And we need to have more of that, right? When I became a faculty member, 75% of my students came from the undergraduate realm, meaning that they were undergraduates at the institutions at which I was teaching. And I basically took those undergraduates as sophomores, and and it's great because you can train them up. And by the time they graduate as seniors, they're fully trained on the basics of operation. And I had a laboratory, so they were fully trained on how to operate all of the systems in my lab. They were fully trained on what knowledge they needed to have to be successful. So moving into a graduate framework was really, really easy for them. And it was great for me because I kind of knew what to expect from the students when they showed up day one. I think it's the way all faculty should be prosecuting a significant amount of their programs. But we, and by and large, don't do that, right? What faculty tend to do is get people from the outside in. And while that's helpful, I think we need more of a balance. And so we need to do what we can to incentivize that balance. Every faculty member should have a significant number of current undergrads in their laboratory, right? That's how you do it. That's how you make it. You probably can't provide an opportunity for everyone, but we can definitely go 10x where we are now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things as a university we have challenges is, of course, we're all siloed in the schools and colleges that we are part of. And some of the interdisciplinary work is really the way of helping other disciplines, be able to address some of our social challenges. So for example, Dr. Siddhartha Sakur from the engineering school, he runs a center called CASP, and he has, graduate students that I work with, who are very interested in understanding social issues so that they can think about great solutions. But what else do you think we could do to do some of this cross-disciplinary work? Because, I've always been one who lives at the edges of disciplines. Always has been a little challenging for some people, but it has, to me, it's the way that I grow ideas, think about problems differently, come up with different things that we can test in my lab. But how else can we sort of facilitate that across campus a little bit more? What are some of your thoughts there?
So I've been working with our new Vice President for Research and Innovation, to work on funding approaches that kind of push groups from different areas together. Mm-hmm. And there is a seed funding program where, as a prerequisite for accessing the seed funds, you have to be, it has to be more than one school or college working together on a topic. And so I'm a big believer in incentivizing. I'm a big believer in carrots and putting opportunities out for faculty. And I'll throw a stick or two out there when you have to, right? But this is an area where, carrots work. And so then there's the realization that the real significant problems, that's one of the reasons why you're so successful, because you're on that edge. And the real significant problems are moving out of single disciplines now, right? All the 21 grand challenges, if I put them in front of you now, all have solutions that involve at least 3 disciplines, not just 2, but at least 3 disciplines, right? There are scientific challenges, but then there's social challenges and economic challenges on top of that. And they just span multiple disciplines. How do you hope to solve the major problems of our time, or even have any inkling of success if you're not working across the boundaries of different disciplines, right? And so,
yeah, I mean, to me, that's always been that's the creative part of our world. So I'm wondering, since, you're in the DC area, you're now in, opportunities to have, to speak with the Hill and to speak with Richmond, for those who aren't from Virginia, that's where our state legislature and governor exists. What do you think are some of the, what do you hear people talk about in terms of the issues related to reforming the criminal legal system?
well, we're still, the unfortunate part is we're still dealing with a fundamental hesitancy for people to believe that that there's real bias in the system. Despite the factual data that's placed in front of people, we still get a lot of pushback when I talk to folk on these issues, right? And even down to the point where, I mean, people will say, well, look, we clearly have no issues relative to race in society. You're here. Look, you're the president of Virginia's largest and most diverse institution. Surely we have solved this, unless you wouldn't be here, right? And there's a grain of truth in that, but just a grain, right? The reality is that, yes, I can be here and we could have made progress in hiring me, while at the same time not have made progress in dealing with some of the fundamental issues that affect us from the perspective of perception, right? There was just this recent, and I don't know if you were involved with this or you connected with this at all, but there was this recent study that was just done on the Minneapolis Police Department that actually culminated after the death of George Floyd. And they looked at hundreds of hours of police cam videos. So they were given access to every single, all of the output from the police cams over a 2-year period. And they just watched the videos. And the outcomes that they were able to glean from watching how, because, the video is always on, you don't know, you're seeing people's interaction on a day-to-day basis. You kind of lose track of the fact that there is a camera there, right? And it's just amazing how many more times Black motorists were stopped and white motorists were not. It's just, right? If there's no stop, there can be no crime, right? At least, it was just amazing to see. It was amazing to see these episodes of use of force, right? Use of chokeholds, use of other things to subdue people in one circumstance where it wasn't used in another. And so we can be in a situation, and this is where the complexity comes in. We can be in a situation where both things are right. We can make progress in one hand and still have progress to be made on the other. One doesn't necessarily mean that the other is solved, right? And that is why we need centers like this one. That is why we need people to really take an in-depth look analytically at the data and be able to take that information and use it to inform policy.
So on that note, though, what could we do to help with the message to Congress or to Richmond about these systemic issues? Because I think, in working with students across the campus and other places, unless you understand how the criminal legal system works and some of the major issues, we often, people don't really get, because they place it, it's the, these are bad people sort of issues, as compared to thinking about, people's opportunities or choices that people had to make that ended up making sometimes very foolish decisions.
Right.
But, how do we, in your experience, how could we help communicate some of these pressing needs, because we are in a very complex time where there's interest in reforming the legal system, but there's also a pushback now because of concerns about rising crime.
No, I
And
get it. Well, it first starts from with a, you see, you're in the knowledge, information, and understanding business, right? And to me, I think we have to highlight two things. The first is, I think we have to highlight where the paradoxes and the inequities and the bias exist. I think you have access to that data. You need to, even something as simple as putting it out on a web page and saying, here are all the instances we found in our work that show bias, right? So that it is accessible for people to get an understanding, right? And then the second part kind of dovetails of what you just said, is this whole idea of choices. I grew up in a very poor community in Harlem, where only three of my friends, three of the kids I grew with, made it out of that community. And when I say made it out, it's probably about, when I was growing up, 25, 30 of us, all young people who, in times of the kids in my age group that made up the neighborhood, so to speak, and or that made up the couple of buildings in my neighborhood. And what I will tell you is, of that group, me and two others made it out of that community. The others are dead, in jail, or part of the criminal justice system, or got strung out on drugs, or died from some other means, right? Sometimes, and you ask, well, what is the difference between me and those kids? Well, was I smarter? Nope. I wasn't the smartest growing up. I wasn't the fastest, and I wasn't the strongest, right? I became smarter in time, right? I became stronger in time. I became faster in time. But at that point in time, I was not. The difference is choices, right? And sometimes the choices you make are an outcome of the choices you have, right? The choices you make are an outcome of the choices you have, or the choices you perceive you have.
Mhm.
I perceived I had different choices than some of them perceived. And that led to different decisions being made, really. And at that, and to be totally honest with you, I saw my first drug deal at 11. And I'm sitting there with my friend who's doing the deal, my best friend at the time, who goes on to become one of the largest drug dealers in New York. And he asked me then, he was selling joints in nickel and dime bags. Somebody here knows what those are, but I'm not going to go into detail.
I know what that's what Bitcoin's about.
I don't want the commentary to be the president talking about nickel and dime bags. Okay, but the reality is, he asked me that I want to sell with him because he kept you kept half of what you sold, right? So if you sold a dime bag for $10, you kept 5. And for 11, 12-year-old kid, that was pretty decent money. It was good money back in the city at that time. And so, but I told him no. It wasn't apparent to me at that time that was a better choice than saying yes, right? I made it in part because my mother would have killed me if she found out that I was selling. That's number one. But also because I just felt in my heart that there was a better path. I couldn't see one at the time, but I thought there could be. You see what I'm saying? I perceived that there could be. He did not, right? Who was making the more intelligent decision? Okay, in hindsight, you can say I was, but there are other people who didn't make that decision, who didn't turn out like me, who struggled their whole life, who never had money, and then who died anyway, right? Or who went to jail anyway, right? Would you say that that was a better decision for them? I just don't know, right? And so helping people to understand, helping society to understand this complex mechanism and web of choices is real. The choices you make are an outcome of the choices you perceive you have.
But I think emphasizing the last part of your statement, the choices you have, is sort of, what we offer people as opportunities to think about different choices that they themselves can make, or they can have influence on other people.
Right.
And, both Danielle and I will both say, we love being, professors, because we're helping people see a different world for themselves. And we're helping people see that there are different opportunities that one doesn't think exist for themselves. So I think that's like the most fundamental piece that really drives me is, we're giving people future orientations. Just like I remember one of my first undergraduate professors who basically said to me, I grew up, my dad ran a store. He's like, you could go to graduate school. I didn't even know what graduate school was. But he gave me a choice that I never knew I had. And I think that's,
and that's the point,
what we
right?
offer. Right. Exactly.
That is indeed the point. And so we have to engage as many young people as we possibly can to help them. Even those young people who make it to our doors are not aware of all the choices they have in terms of where they can take their careers.
Right. Or just how they can contribute and make the world a better place. So
agreed.
Yeah. All right. So President Washington, we really appreciate the time with you.
Thank you.
And we greatly appreciate you sharing with us today, your insights. And we're going to continue doing great things at Mason and elsewhere.
I look forward to great things from all of you. Thank you for giving me some time to engage with all of you. And I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Go Patriots.
All right.
Thank you.